What is going on, everybody? My name is Nathan, and this is Salty Productions. Now, today I would like to talk a little bit about the standard game mode in Hearthstone, and why I've been enjoying the heck out of this game mode. And what I've determined is that it has come down to a difference in tempo between standard and wild. Now, in wild, there are sort of two factors that make it so different from standard. First, wild has a much stricter meta. The net decks are way more strict, and they have very little room for sort of changing out cards to change the flavor of a deck, or to perhaps just sort of experiment to see if the deck can work with different cards. Also, Wild has a massive spectrum of tempo. And what I mean by this is that on one end of the spectrum, you have decks that are looking to pull off perhaps a turn 6 or a turn 7 win, such as Face Hunter. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have the super control-y decks, such as Freeze Mage or even Grinder Mage, which is not a very popular deck, but it did exist as a net deck at one point in time. So in Wild, you have these hyper aggressive deck and hyper control decks. And what I love about Standard is how the limiting of the pool of cards has shrunk that spectrum to be more around the sort of mid-range-y type of tempo. So here's the thing. I am a Timmy player in Magic, and if you guys don't know what a Timmy player is, there are sort of three personalities that people in Magic the Gathering, at least, have recognized. You have Timmy, Spike, and Johnny. And Timmy focuses on playing a lot of massive creatures. That's sort of what this player likes to do, or this player archetype. And I think that because I'm sort of a Timmy player in Magic, what that translates to Hearthstone is that I love to command board presence. Board presence, just having a lot of minions, having a lot of large minions, is something that I love about this game. That's sort of why I play this game. And the thing about Standard is that Standard, due to that shrinking of the spectrum of tempos, being more focused around mid-rangey sort of decks, focuses a lot more on commanding board presence, playing minions, sort of trading those minions for value, and working the board to your advantage. And that's what I love about this game. That's why I play Hearthstone, is basically to have that commanding board advantage. You know, living for those moments where your opponent has to have either a board wipe or they lose is why I why I play Hearthstone, for those advantageous moments like that. And in Standard, it is much more focused on commanding the board because you don't have ridiculously powerful cards that combo together to make insane decks that are present in Wild. In Wild, you know, if you take deck archetypes like Freeze Mage or even Handlock, you know, you sort of control the board, you play a bunch of removal spells, you have ridiculous cards, and you sort of just wait until you can combo off on turn X. And Handlock, alternatively, you sort of do the same thing, except that you play massive minions at a point in time in which you think that your opponent cannot handle them. And even if you think that your opponent can handle them, you sort of keep playing those massive minions, those Molten Giants, those Mountain Giants, and eventually into Jiraxxus, into the very late game. So in Wild, you have these ridiculous decks, and you have very little room for experimentation, in my personal opinion. Now, you don't need to adhere to such a strict competitive meta, but in my opinion, if you want to play a fun deck and you also want to play a deck that will garner you wins, then you need to sort of have at least 85 to 90% of the recipes that make up these decks, especially in Wild. And in decks such as Control Warrior, you have back in the days of Patron, specifically, you have very little room to actually change around the deck from what is considered meta. That was actually a thing for Patron back in the day, was that if you wanted to include a certain card, like the most that you could sort of change around Patron Warrior was maybe 1 or 2 cards. And that was just because the decks that were in Patron Warrior the cards that were in Patron Warrior were so powerful that it was not, and they synergized so well that it was not worth it to take out any of those cards at all. But with the power level of cards in Standard shrinking, you have a sort of compressing action taking place for the power level of these cards. And I love that because it means that it's a little bit more of a malleable meta. Now, probably not in the hyper competitive scene. For example, I think I saw recently on Reddit that Aggro Shaman was one of the top win rate decks of the moment. And I don't know how flexible that deck is, but I love the fact that in Standard, because you have a smaller power difference in cards, that you can sort of change out cards as you please, perhaps up to 20% of what you might discover in a net deck, and then you can build that deck to have a different flavor. It definitely encourages a little bit more experimentation, and I really appreciate that about Hearthstone, because most of the Hearthstone for me is, like I said before, commanding that board presence, but also deck crafting. That is definitely half of the fun for me in Hearthstone, is actually building a deck and sort of just trying it out, just seeing how it functions against other people. And in Standard, that is way more doable than in Wild, because again, in Wild, you're sort of just waiting until you can combo off on turn X or play massive minions on turn X and just have these very, very, very powerful interactions. Now, that's not to say that mid-range decks don't exist in Wild, or that they're not super dominant or anything like that. I'm sure there are definitely, maybe there are mid-range decks. I was thinking of mid-range Druid. I was like, oh, mid-range Druid still is a thing, but actually it isn't with the Force Savage nerf. But anyway, my point is here that I love the skew towards the mid-range. Mid-range for me in Hearthstone means commanding that board presence, working the board advantage, and that's why I love to play Hearthstone. And when you have a game mode that really focuses on exactly that, that's when people like me have way more fun in this game. So that's, I don't know, I guess that's pretty much what I wanted to say for today, guys. So I don't know, I kind of want to know what you guys think if you're in sort of the same boat. Do you like Wild or do you like Standard more? Because they're so different, and I think that Hearthstone will eventually evolve into something that Magic the Gathering has actually sort of evolved into, which is to have a bunch of different game modes where you have certain sets are banned, certain sets are not, certain cards are banned in particular. But I think Hearthstone will have to release many, many more cards in order to reach that point where that is a necessary step to take. But that is pretty much all I had to say for today, guys. So thank you all for watching. Feel free to leave a rating on the video. Feel free to subscribe if you enjoy my type of content. And yeah, that's all I had to say once again. So thank you for your viewership once again, and I'll see you all in the next video.
Back to your homes.
Reporting for duty. Well played. Reporting for duty. Put your faith in the light. Battle. Reporting for duty. The battle. The battle.
Glory to the Sindori.
Well played.
That belongs in a museum.
Wow, are you kidding me? Oh my god.
Reporting for duty. Follow the rule.
That was a mistake.
Well met.
I don't have enough
Reporting
mana.
for duty. The battle! Reporting for duty. The battle!
For justice!
Reporting for duty. Put your faith in the light. Reporting for duty. Reporting for duty.
My shield for Argus!
I have no time for games.
Reporting for duty.
Into the breach!
Reporting for duty.
Tadingo!
Reporting for duty.
That was a mistake.
To battle!
For justice!
To battle!
The victory is yours.